Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and it's book club day. We are joined again by cartoonist and author Joel Christian Gill, who's going to help us dig into one of the most iconic graphic novels of all time. It's Watchmen by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons. The first full edition of Watchmen came out in 1987, and it is a gritty and complex vigilante tale that has since been adapted into both a television show and a film. Today, Joel and I talk about why this book is considered one of the greatest comics of all time, what Alan Moore is saying about policing, God, and America, and Joel helps answer some of my very basic questions as a comic book newbie. Please be warned, there are a few spoilers on today's episode. Make sure you listen through the end of the episode to find out what our book club pick will be for August. Quick reminder, everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks can be found in the link in the show notes. If you want more of The Stacks, you can join the Stacks Pack. It's just $5 a month. And when you join, you have access to our monthly virtual book club, our Stacks Pack Discord, and the Stacks bonus episodes. And this month, you're going to want to join because we're going to discuss the HBO Watchmen series as our bonus episode in July. So yeah, all you have to do is head to patreon.com/thestacks to join. All right, y'all. Now it's time for my conversation with Joel Christian Gill about Watchmen. All right, everybody, we are back. Today is the Stacks Book Club Day. I am so excited. We are joined again by graphic novelist, cartoonist, author, historian, professor, many qualifiers, Joel Christian Gill. Joel, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
I'm so excited you're here. We are doing Watchmen by Alan Moore with illustrations from Dave Gibbons. This is, for people who don't know, first of all, let me just say this, we will have spoilers today. But for folks who don't know what this book is about, it is a satirical comic book story told in 12 chapters that were released serialized, but now it's all in one book, if you want it that way, I guess. And it's the story of a group of adventurers, which are superheroes, and there's a murder mystery at the start, and we get to know about these sort of washed up has-been superheroes. So Joel, we always start here. What do you think of Watchmen?
I think Watchmen is probably, it's one of the greatest comics ever written. It has a lot of different themes. And I think one of the things that people miss about Watchmen initially is the idea that, so like Alan Moore often says that people come up to me and say, Rorschach is my favorite character. And he always tells them, like, get the fuck away from me. That's the guy that you think is your favorite character. Because Rorschach is actually supposed to be a critique of Batman. Batman is a horrible superhero. As I have said, and if anybody's ever heard me talk about superheroes, you know that if I was a kid and I had seen Black Panther, I would have grown up wanting to be T'Challa as opposed to Batman, because T'Challa takes care of his people, he uses his money and resources to create a utopia. Batman basically does all this research and development to beat up poor people. And Rorschach is basically the real life version of what Batman would be, right? He's like an incel. He's sitting in his basement, he's beating up poor people. He's torturing people. He is basically Nixon's Law and Order campaign taken to its fullest extreme, right? Like police need extra legal activity, extra legal powers. And so they use that. So at its core, Watchmen is not really plot driven. That starts with the murder of the comedian, but it's not really about the murder of the comedian. It's about a descent into madness. And it's about these two extreme versions of Law and Order. One is like an extreme version of a utopia by Ozymandias. The other one is an extreme version of fascism by Rorschach. And while Ozymandias eventually wins by killing 4 million people or 8 million people at the end of the book, he wins. Rorschach also wins too, because if you watch the TV show, the natural progression of Rorschach's ideology is white supremacy. And so I can go into more of it, but at its core, I think it's Alan Moore originally wanted to use actual old Golden Age superheroes.
Mm,
But DC didn't want him to do that. So he created these superheroes. I will say one more thing that I think is really important. I think Dr. Manhattan is a metaphor for God.
okay.
Because when you read Dr. Manhattan, he has all of the powers of God. He is a godlike character, but he absolutely doesn't care. He just sort of exists in this plane. And I think
Right.
that's, like at its core, I think that Watchmen is a character study of 5 individual peoples who have God complexes and one person
Mhm.
who actually is a God but doesn't care.
Right. That's good. Okay. Let me
That
give you
gave
my
me a lot.
initial thoughts and then we'll dig in.
Okay.
My initial thoughts are less smart because so this was my first read of this book. I've never read any superhero anything. I have only ever seen two superhero movies. One is the first Black Panther, and the other is The Incredibles. So that is the extent of my superhero knowledge. And I have seen the Watchmen TV show now twice. I watched it long before I read the book, like right when it came out. And then I watched all of it in the last 36 hours. Um, because I wanted to just see what they did. And we don't have to talk about that, but maybe we will. I loved the beginning and the end of this book. I felt very lost in the middle sections. And I think my understanding of why I felt lost is because the middle stuff is a lot to do with like playing with the superhero form and like a lot of inside baseball about superhero stuff. So it felt like really talky to me, but I didn't get it. I loved seeing how all of the characters, like their backstories, and like seeing how they all viewed the world through these very specific like lenses. And I was really taken by this idea that a lot of superheroes don't have superpowers. That is news to me. I didn't know that. I thought Batman was the only one. I thought all the other superheroes had real superpowers. So I was really interested in this idea of like everyday people who just like wanted to be cops, I guess, like but like not being up. I mean, I feel like the thing that I took away from this, and obviously this is me reading it in 2023 with my own personal lens and politics and everything, but like this also felt like a huge indictment on the police system. Like the police are so useless in this. And they hate the superheroes, but the superheroes are also just useless police officers. Everyone's like showing up after the fact, and everyone has all their own shit and they're not helping. And like, no one's doing anything about the real problem, I guess, until Ozymandias, but like his choice is a little extreme and we could get to that later. But so I felt like, and I liked that it was satire. Like I could pick up on that. I could tell that it was like a joke on a thing, like, or like a queering of a form. Like I could tell that. But, and so I liked all of that. But the middle, I was like, chapter 3, I hated. Chapter like 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, I was like, I don't know where I am. Like I got really lost in there. So yeah.
There is a lot of really dense stuff. And I think, it's really interesting. I think if you boil down Watchmen to the metaphor of the tales of the Black Freighter. Because the tales of the
Well, so I didn't understand that at all. I couldn't follow that story at all. I had no fucking clue. That's the comic within the comic.
Yeah, so the Tales of the Black Freighter is a metaphor. It's so I compare that To Kill a Mockingbird and the scene in which Atticus has to kill, Tim Johnson, the dog, right? The dog that's everybody's
Okay.
friend. And it used to be like the town dog, and
Got it.
everybody loved him, and he was just like this, this stray, this lovable stray, but he has rabies.
Okay.
And rabies actually causes him to just bite anybody, right? And he has to be put down. And Atticus is the only one to do it, right? And that is a metaphor for the entire story because Tim Johnson is the town, right?
Right.
Everybody loved him, everything's good. And the disease that the town has is racism, but the disease that Tim Johnson has is rabies. So the Tales of the Black Freighter is exactly that. Here are these people who have these really good intentions, and they go
Mhm.
out into the world to do these things, and they're doing them in spite of this corrupt system, right? There's this
Mhm.
corrupt system, and they're trying to do these things in the corrupt system. But eventually, he goes right back to the corrupt system. He just sort of leans into it.
Mm.
Ozymandias does it, and Rorschach does it in just two different extreme ways. And so when you look at how, like, I think it's really interesting. He starts off with the murder of the comedian, and so you're following this idea that the murder of the comedian is actually the thing. But by the time you find out who murdered the comedian, it doesn't really matter anymore, right? Because it's just a
Right.
red herring. It's just basically a way in which to look at, what happens when you give people too much power, which is Dr. Manhattan, and he just doesn't care. What happens when people have no power and they sort of exude their power from this moral superiority, which is Rorschach. And then you've got all these little people in the middle who don't really matter in a lot of ways, right? They just don't really
Yeah.
count,
Yeah.
and they don't really even. Um, they don't even put a dent in the system. This is why I think it's really brilliant, because the critique of superheroes, and we're all like, and this was in the 1980s, right? So everybody was trying to make serious superheroes and all this other stuff. And Alan Moore is like, yeah, but this is like, it's all bullshit, right? If you saw somebody,
Yeah.
like, the only people who dress up in costumes and give themselves names and go out in the middle of the night doing things are serial killers, right? It's not
Mhm.
real superheroes, right? So,
Mhm.
like, if
Mhm.
you are a regular person and you want to save the world, and you have like, you want to go do something good, you become a police officer. You don't become Batman, right?
Right,
So,
right, right. And I do want to say also, like, I really liked the book. I like, after I was reading it and then watching the show and everything, I just kept being like, oh my God, this is so smart. Like, I just felt like it was so smart. And like, we talk about getting it a lot on the show. Like, I don't get it. Like, I didn't get everything. And I definitely know I didn't get everything in this book, but I loved not getting it. Like, I loved like looking at the pictures and being like, oh, and like, I felt really smart because I knew that Rorschach was that redhead guy holding the sign from the first scene. I was like, oh, that's him. And then I like went back and I was like trying to see a glimpse of like the side of his face. And I was like, I think that's the redhead guy. So I was like, oh, I got it. I got it. Apparently not everybody gets that.
not
I
everybody
got
gets
it.
that, and everybody, and that's the thing. I think people leave thinking Rorschach is the hero, but he's not. Right? There are no heroes.
Right. But who were you rooting for? Like, can you go back to the first time you read this? Do you remember who you were rooting for, or like who your allegiance was with?
I don't think I'm rooted for anybody. I think when I originally read this book, I just wanted to see more of Dr. Manhattan, right? I think
Mm,
that's the thing that I kept thinking. I want to see more. Like, why doesn't he knows everything? He could fix everything, right? Dr. Manhattan knows from the beginning what the entire story is, right? He knows
right.
what's going to happen, and he doesn't change anything, right?
Right.
That really amazing line is that we're all puppets, Lori. I just can see the strings, right? Like,
Right.
you can't
Right.
do anything about it because it's already happened. Everything will be and what be. So I was really fascinated by Dr. Manhattan, as like a character who's all knowing, all powerful, and can do anything, but just doesn't. Right?
Right. And I think like, so for me, I in the beginning was rooting for Rorschach because that's who we start with, right? Like, that's who you're like, I come in, I'm assuming this is my protagonist. Like, this is the guy whose journal we're in, this is the story that we're in. And then, as we keep going, I'm like, this guy's like, I think I took a note that was like, this guy's really giving Reaganomics over here. Like, I was like, I don't like, I knew that something was not right, or like Nixon's America or something. And then I didn't know who to root for. And I did, because I didn't ever want to root for Adrian Veidt. Like, I never felt like I liked him. Like, there was always something about him that I didn't really care for. And I feel like, I mean, one of the big problems with the book for me is like the women are
They're one dimensional.
it's not great for the ladies. They're being raped, they're being beaten in the streets. Nobody is helping them, nobody cares. Lori is just like, yeah, Dan, let's have sex. I love sex. I'm Lori. Which is what's so great about the show, because Lori gets a full makeover.
Yeah, and
Um,
she becomes a different person. But I think, and she becomes an FBI agent. And I think
yes,
it's
and
real,
she becomes her dad.
yeah. And the thing that I think is really interesting about, I mean, it's, like, I always, whenever I talk about books, specifically things that were written before right now, I say
Mhm.
everything up until right now was garbage. I have hope from this point
Right.
forward, right? Because, like, whenever, it's almost like everything's going to be sexist, racist, homophobic, right? Like, it's just going to have those things in there. And that doesn't excuse it. It's just to
Mhm.
acknowledge that those things are there.
Sure.
And so, yeah,
But it's
one of the
interesting in
problems.
a It's interesting though, because I feel like he flips so many things like of my understanding about superheroes. And you would think that he would kind of flip the women characters because you have Catwoman and you have like Wonder Woman and they're in these little costumes and they're like whatever. And he sort of just like kept that, which I thought was interesting. Like I didn't feel like he said anything about the women characters that was different than what I would have assumed knowing nothing about women characters going in.
Yeah, and I think that's just a function of patriarchy, right? And male
Sure.
privilege, like the idea of not really thinking about it and not really considering it.
Sure. Yeah.
And Alan Moore, who's I think he's in his late 60s, early 70s,
Yeah.
is at a point in his career where he doesn't even do comics anymore. He doesn't talk about it. He just bath mouths comics all the time. But the thing
My
that,
guy.
yeah, but what he actually, but what, and so like he doesn't evolve, right? Like there are a lot of people who have evolved from that
Hmm.
time point, like who've
Hmm.
written in the 1980s and they've evolved and they wouldn't do the same thing again. And I don't think I don't think he's evolved as a on that front, but I don't know because he hasn't written anything else. Well, he wrote League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and he wrote from
V for Vendetta,
V
right?
for
That's it.
Vendetta, and which is really good, and it's more about politics and the political state, and it's sort of George Orwellian. And he
And he
wrote
wrote the Batman that you like, the
no,
joke,
he wrote The Killing Joke, which is really
Killing
good.
Joke.
Yeah, he wrote The Killing. He wrote a lot of stuff. I mean, he wrote a lot of comics in the 80s. He wrote Swamp Thing all through the 80s. Oh, From Hell. He wrote From Hell, which became a movie with Johnny Depp in it.
And he's talked about how much he does not want his things to be adapted and how much he hates that.
Yeah, he hates the adaptations, and I think I don't know. I haven't read. I mean, I kind of tuned him out after a while because
Okay.
he's a little crazy
Okay.
a lot of ways. But I don't know what he said about the TV show, but I thought the Watchmen TV show picked up the themes that he
Yeah.
was running with really well.
I think so too. I mean, I think what he had said about adaptations is like he didn't want people to do them because he didn't want people to think that comics had to be on screen, like that comics could be comics and they could be on the page and that they can do special things in that place that can't be done on the screen. And that like this idea that everything has to be turned into some sort of film adaptation, which I do respect because I do think there's this assumption that like, oh, if the book is good, we should make a movie out of it. Or if the book is bad. And I feel like some things are just books. Like, so
Yeah,
I
and
get that.
but I will say this: I think that television, specifically serialized television, is the
Yes.
closest adaptation to
Yes.
comics. I mean, I
I
don't think
agree.
that's why the first Watchmen movie was such a hot mess. It was terrible. Like if anybody's
Mm.
watched it, like the book Watchmen is really about a character study of all these characters,
Mhm.
and it's not really plot driven, and it's not really about fighting or superpowers. It's about political philosophies. It's about fascism and this utopian society, which could be described as like socialist or communist. It's about like these sort of extremes and how we end up by going so far to the extreme, we do the exact same things. It's that circular thing
Mhm.
that you've probably heard in
Mhm.
political theory a lot, where people go so far to these either extremes that they
Right.
end up at the same point, which is
It's the
totalitarian.
anti-vaxxer conundrum where it's
Yeah,
like you have far right-wing people and then far left people who are all anti-vaxxers together.
exactly, right? And I think when you follow that ideology, it becomes totalitarianism, right? And I think that that's what Ozymandias ends up with. And I think if given Rorschach the chance, he would have ended up with the exact same thing. And
So you
so,
think Rorschach and Ozymandias would have ended up together?
yes, I think they would eventually. Yeah, I think given the opportunity, they would have both agreed on the means, and which is what happens in the TV show, right? Rorschach's
Right.
ideology merges with Ozymandias's, but become like we're going to take and turn Dr. Manhattan's power into our power, and we're going to use
Right.
that to remake the world in our image, right? It's
Right.
basically the exact same thing, which I thought was just absolutely brilliant the way in
Yeah.
which they did that. I think there's a number. I don't know. Did you notice that all of the panels in Watchmen were a 9-panel grid?
So I have notes about form for you. I have questions about 9 panels. I have questions about the images. I loved how the images didn't always match the words and it was like jumping around in time. I thought that was super cool. And then I also noticed that like the speech bubbles were different for different people. Like obviously Dr. Manhattan's were blue, but Rorschach got like squigglies, and then Ozymandias got like really clean ones. And like, so I noticed some things, but I don't know what 9 panels means. I just noticed that sometimes it was 9. And then like when there were really big moments, it might be like a really long, tall one or like a fat one. Or of course with the squid, it's like the whole page. And that's like, ooh.
Right. So that's the thing I want you to connect to, right? So it's a 9-panel grid. So it's always set up in that 9 panel. So sometimes the panels are 3 across. Sometimes they're all 9 panels, but they're always in that rectangular shape. But they don't really change the shape, right? They, like some of them become square and then some of them become round. They're always in that 9-panel grid, which I think was very purposeful, because once you get to the final, like the climax, it's just a few pages of like full bleed like drawings, right? And I think that's really interesting, in a way in which to sort of use the medium of comics to show like it's almost like this is your big moment. This is when all of the music plays. This is when you get the full like panoramic view, right? This is exactly that moment. And they do it very carefully, right? You don't do that. And then like the word balloons, which is what I was talking about with I'm Asterius Polyp, and how using different word balloons and word bubbles for different people sets a tone for that. It like makes it gives you a visual clue to who's talking sometimes. And you can do that when you're writing, right? By just saying she said, like Tracy said, Tracy said versus Joel said. Or you could do that in film because you can see those people happening. So how do you do that with comics? Well, you change the word balloons and you change the colors. The other thing that you probably noticed is a thing called non-adjacent sequencing in comics. When you use an image from some other place in the book and you place it here, but you put new words on it,
like a flashback.
Yeah, it's like a flashback. But
we got that a lot with the comedian's murder.
So you get this flashback, but they put different words on the flashback to give you a different sense of that whole panel. And so let me just give you a little bit about how, like, this is the quick lecture for all the people who've never read comics and are just like jumping in, things to look for. So comics have to do this really interesting dance. Like you have to have, the words have to say something and the pictures have to show something, and they have to sort of like merge into a thing that tells a whole new story. And I'll give you a really good example. If I were to say, Tracy came onto the call and she was angry, right? That's not good writing, right? That's because you're supposed to show, not tell. So if I say Tracy came onto the call and she was whipping pages and turning the chair over and she plopped down and then she angrily put on her headphones, that would be showing, right? That would be showing you. But in comics, I can't do that. I can't say Tracy came into the call angry and show you being angry because that's redundant, right? So I can show you come in, ripping up things, angrily putting on headphones, sitting down, and then I could say something like they were out of mocha lattes at Starbucks, right?
Ugh, the worst. How
So that
dare
gives
they?
you that individual thing gives you a much more complete understanding of the story. And so, which is different from movies, right? Because you don't do that in movies. You can't have words saying something that the pictures are doing, right?
Right.
Because it's just a different way of sort of expressing things. And so comics does that. And the best comics do that really well, where they're giving you a little information that enhances the picture, but doesn't redundantly show the picture unless you use it specifically to show some redundant sort of qualities. And I think that's one of the things, that's the like delicate dance. This is when I say, like, people always say they're afraid to call me a cartoonist because it seems like less than. It's like, if you think it's less than, try it, because that's the delicate dance you have to do. How do I show you something and tell you something that all those two things come together to do something that neither one of those things can do differently?
Well, and that makes me also think of like the challenge when you like, especially in a book like this, where you have so many scenes where people are just talking to each other. Cause like, you don't just want to draw people like standing talking, right? Like that's super boring to look at. And so I feel like, but this story is really dependent on that because it is about ideology and people talking things through. Like we have that whole scene with Laurie and Dr. Manhattan where they're fighting on Mars, and it's like the images are showing us like drawn back or up close and all this different stuff. But really, they're just having like a conversation. And in a movie, you'd probably just have them sitting there talking. But in this, it's like I don't want to just flip through nine images on a page for 10 pages. And so like there's some really cool stuff that I definitely noticed of like, oh, he's trying to like paint a scene for us, and he knows we know they're talking, so he gets to like kind of play around. And I guess he in this case is Dave Gibbons.
And so the thing that I would add to that, which I think is really interesting, is in comics there's this thing called the 1 foot rule. Not everybody follows it, and so the 1 foot rule means that on any given page you want to have at least 1 foot on every page. What that does is it forces you not to have the boring talking heads like over and over and over again. You want to sort of pan back and forth, because if you're filming a scene and you film 2 people talking, you still don't show just those 2 people talking in the entire scene. You pan to one person, you pan to the other person. Sometimes you're looking at one person, getting their reaction while the other person's talking. You scroll out, you do all these different things.
Right.
But in comics, you can't do that, right? Because you have one scene. So how do you mimic that variation in scene, and how do you do that to add interest to the page? So this is where art and design comes into play when you're thinking about your compositions and your pages. So it's not about just showing the person talking. It's about, like I always say, my definition of comics is images that are adjacently put together in an aesthetically interesting way in the purpose of forming a story, right? Because that's what it has to do. It has to form the story. So giving you the context of that you're always being on Mars, giving you the context that, these 2 people are talking, giving the context of like who's bigger, who's smaller, like all of those things. It's all about giving you the perspective and making you feel that space. And I think one of the best examples, I don't remember what chapter it is. I just have a lecture on it, so I just show the image talking about it. But it's the 9-panel page where Dr. Manhattan is talking about where he is when he first goes to Mars. And he's talking in present tense, past tense, and future tense. And he says things like, I'm there 12 seconds from now. I'm at Gila Flats taking this picture. I'm on Mars. I am looking at the picture in my hand. The picture is in my hand. I drop it to the
ground. Yes, of course. With the picture.
Yeah, and he keeps talking about that whole thing. That page,
that's chapter this page.
Yeah, that's it.
It's chapter 4. It's the first page of chapter 4.
Yeah, and that page, if you look at the way that page is arranged, you've got the 9-panel grid, and everything around that 9-panel grid is Dr. Manhattan searching for his humanity. And that one page, that one panel in the direct center is his humanity. That's his connection to his humanity.
The woman.
Yep. No, it's not even necessarily the woman, just that moment. Because that moment is his last human moment, right? Before he becomes Dr. Manhattan.
Oh, yes. I see. Okay, let's take a quick break and then we're going to come back. Valentine's Day is upon us and I've got love on the brain. Love for books. Duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the stacks. Okay, I read something that I just want to tell people about at home because I thought it was cool to end our forum conversation. Chapter 5, which is called Fearful Symmetry. Apparently, if you look at this, the grids are symmetrical from the first page to the last page of the chapter. So you have like a nine grid on the first page, and then the last page is a 9 grid. And and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like I could gush about this book for so much. There's just so many like brilliant little things that people did, which is why it's like one of the 100 greatest novels of all time. And there's just like a lot of like little tiny, like I can't. So like the Black Freighter, because you said you didn't get the Black Freighter.
Not at all. Not at all.
Did it make sense when I explained it though? Like it
does, but I couldn't follow that story. I think because of the way that it was always interspliced with the guy on the street who was selling the magazines, right? Like those. And then it was like, I started trying to read it where I would read all of the Black Freighter text at once to try to figure out what the story was. But I just couldn't keep those two things in my head. Like it didn't work. I couldn't do it. I'm not there yet. I feel like it's a skill.
Well, did you recognize in the Watchmen television show, they do a similar thing with the TV show?
The TV show, I did. But I also listened to Damon Lindelof do the podcast with the guy, like they did like an official Watchmen podcast. And so they talked about it. And so I did listen to that. So I don't know if I would have recognized it, show within the show. I think they told me. I mean, they even said it on the show. They're like, you did a comic within a comic in the book. And then you guys did the show within a show. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, I think, that. I mean, there's just like, I don't know. So after you read Watchmen and then watched the TV show, did you connect anything?
Yes.
Like do you see all of like the other little things that were happening?
Oh my God. After I watched the first episode, I was like, holy shit, this is great. I liked Watchmen the first time, but I didn't fucking know what a Laurie Blake was.
Yeah.
I didn't know who, like when I first saw Jeremy Irons in the show, I was like, that's Adrian Veidt. Like I recognized it right away.
Absolutely.
I remember when I watched the show the first time, I was literally like, what the fuck is this guy? Who the fuck is this? Like I had no clue. I didn't understand what Dr. Manhattan was. Like I didn't understand the conversation he was having with Regina King about like meeting her and knowing her. Like all of that to me was just like, what? And it made sense, but I cried when I watched the show the second time. I was so moved by the ring scene. And then also the scene where he's like, I'm in all of our moments together at once. And I was like,
right? He's saying all of those things, or he's laughing about something and it like goes back. And I was
because he's like human for the first time in a way that he's not in the book, which you kind of get at.
Which is really funny. When I watched the TV show, the episode, when God walks into a bar, that whole episode, when he walks into the bar, like I went to bed that night thinking to myself, how do I sleep now knowing God is black? Like they did such a great job with that. But I mean, there's like a lot of little things that they take, like, the politicians who, like the liberal politicians who are also just white supremacists as well. Like I thought was just amazing. Because that's the kind of thing that happens in the book, right? You've got, there's no real good guys, right? You've got the nuclear clock counting down because Dr. Manhattan has left. And what are we going to do about this? How, like now he's gone and like, we're going to go into nuclear war. And so like, if you look at the solutions, a nuclear war, so Adrian Veidt is trying to stop a nuclear war that will kill millions of people by killing millions of people. Like there's no, but at the end, right, it's almost like he did it, right? But there's no saying that a nuclear war wouldn't have actually done the exact same thing. But
here's my question. Why did he do a squid? Do we know? Is there an answer to
that?
No,
I think it was just like he was creating a monster. Like it was just a monster that he was trying to create to show like that terrible thing was about to happen and we all needed to unite around it. I mean, and like what's crazy is this is before 9/11, right?
I know.
This is before 9/11. And like you can hear conservative politicians talking about this exact same thing. We've gotten this thing now. We should all come together. Like that's Adrian.
Well, COVID.
Yeah.
What about COVID? I mean, I think you can't read this book now in 2023 and believe that what Adrian Veidt did is a solution, knowing what we know after COVID. Obviously, COVID is slightly different than like some sort of terror attack or like some sort of supernatural one moment event. Like I think 9/11 hit different than COVID, even though way more people died from COVID because it was like the shock of this moment and this visual thing that you could see and like witnessing that and experiencing that. But I mean, I'm like, oh, that's so nice, Adrian Veidt. You think you did something by killing 3 million people? Well, guess what? Nuclear war tomorrow. See it tomorrow. Nobody fucking cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
And it's really, I don't think I even made the connection to 9/11 or like how like politicians talk about like we all need to come, like this is going to bring us all together when it actually just further divisions. Right.
Yes, of course. Because the thing about Americans, which is what I can speak to, but I wonder if it extends to more people in humanity, but I'll speak to America, is that we don't agree on a lot of things. And so we're going to see everything differently. Like, just like you and I are going to see different things in this book differently. Like, you think a huge event is going to make us come together. It's just going to show all the places that we have different beliefs and like all of the different solutions that anyone would come up with. Because if it's Rorschach who comes up with the solution, what's he going to do? Like, what's his solution to the problem?
His solution is law and order, right? His solution is like...
But what's his solution to the nuclear bomb, I mean?
It's
right? Like, because it's like...
Yeah, law and order. Like, that's the idea. It's law and order, right? Like,
but who's he going to lock up? Like, what's he going to do?
Who would Rorschach lock up? I think he would lock up anybody. It'd be that moral absolution that what's his name talks about, whose name I'm forgetting now, but he writes in
Dan
his memoir.
Dreiberg?
Yeah, when he writes in his memoir in the middle, he's talking about
the hooded justice. Yeah, or, like, under the hood. Guy.
Under the hood, yeah, where he talks. Now he's not hooded justice. He's not
hooded justice. He's the other guy.
Yeah, he is the. I think he was the original owl.
The owl.
Yeah, he was the original owl, which is also
Hollis Mason.
Yeah,
under the hood.
He basically writes from this like white nationalist, like American Christian value sort of place.
Right. Silent generation. Vibes.
Yeah. Like he's got all of those exact same things. And so I think when you look at that, it's like the people that don't conform, right? It's it's, black and brown people, it's queer people. It's like anybody who they deem to be, counterculture in a lot of ways, right? Or counterculture, or just different, right? I mean, you take the default and it's starting as white as the default, and then everybody who doesn't fit that, who doesn't mold to that conformity is also not right. But when you get what you get now in modern day politics, it's not a conformity of like what people look like. It's a conformity of like your belief in capitalism or your belief in these bad ideas. And I think that Rorschach's ideology is that. I think he is Reaganomics. He is, the Reagan era. He is Nixon's law and order. He is Goldwater's ideas. He is all of those things wrapped up. He is Margaret Thatcher. He is all of these people in this one character that people read and they miss the fucking point, like the movie did, right? It's like garter belts and ninja fights, and that's not what it was about.
Right, because he is the ultimate villain, supervillain of all things 1980s if you're of a certain political ideology, right? And then Ozymandias is the ultimate 1980s villain if you're of a different political ideology.
Yeah, so two different people will look at that and think Ozymandias was the good guy, although he killed a bunch of people. And some people would say Rorschach was the good guy, although he would have killed a bunch. His idea. I mean, he was killing people along the way, right?
Yeah, I guess sort of. I wonder if Alan Moore felt like he had to make Ozymandias kill a bunch of people because otherwise it didn't feel like a fair fight between them. Because otherwise Adrian Veidt doesn't feel like a worthy adversary, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it is almost, maybe, I don't know, like
he's too clean otherwise. He's too perfect.
Yeah.
He doesn't because Dan Dreiberg, the second owl guy, he's sort of a nothing person, right? Like he's not on the same level as Rorschach and Ozymandias. Like he's treated more like the women, this sort of like secondary character who like is there, but like nobody takes him seriously. Nobody cares. Nobody really engages with him. They're just like, Dan, get in the fucking car, like get in your little spaceship. Let's go. I mean, like Dan doesn't even come up with, like Lori comes up with the idea to go bust out Rorschach. Like Dan is sort of the most emasculated, if you will, man. He's sort of treated like a nothing. And I feel like if the only way that Alan Moore can have balance with Rorschach and show how terrible he is or whatever is by having someone who is the opposite of him. But I think because of who Alan Moore is, from my understanding, is that if Adrian Veidt doesn't do something bad in some way or something questionable, then the fight's not fair. They're not. It's too clear that Adrian's way is the right way.
Oh,
do you know what I'm seeing?
No, yeah.
See what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. And so it's one of those things where I think, and this is an interesting question just in general about like, how do you come up, what happens when you come up with a story? Because I think about this in terms of like myself, when I'm thinking about stories, do you start with an idea? Like, does he start with like the person who's supposed to be the good guy kills 3 million people, right? And then get there? Or does he start with the person who's supposed to be the good guy is also, I think he probably started with Rorschach first.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think Rorschach was probably because Rorschach, like this guy who's completely obsessed with the crime in his novels, like they'll reach it, they'll scream and I'll say, and I'll whisper no,
Yeah,
never, right?
Never compromise.
Yeah, never back down, right?
Yeah.
He's like in the real world, Rorschach would be wearing like Lions Not Sheep t-shirts and like American flag shirts with the flag pointing down.
Or the blue, I guess not the blue line because he hates the police.
Yeah, the blue line. Like he hates the police because they're not effective. But that same
and he's not wrong there. That's the ideological circle coming together with him and I. I'm like, well, he's not wrong about the police. Be fair,
the police are ineffective, but the solution.
I think he starts with Rorschach also because Rorschach. Because like he's created this world where America's won Vietnam. Nixon is back for more, his third term or whatever. Like, I think that Rorschach fits perfectly into the world that he created, which is why I think he started there, because the whole world is built to support that character.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think it's really interesting, that play on the idea of Nixon having a third term, because Nixon, if you look at Nixon's politics and what was happening in the 1970s, in the late 1970s, and like what he was doing, like I think people would be talking about him like, I don't think I don't think Reagan would have existed if Nixon had not been threatened to impeach. I don't think we would have got Reagan. I think we would have gotten someone like Robert Redford, right? I think we would have gotten that extreme liberal, and that extreme, like not extreme liberal. Sure. I mean, I guess it is extreme liberal because it doesn't really, like I think I just find difference between liberal and a leftist, but it's just basically a soft neoliberal.
It's sort of like a Gavin Newsom moment.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's how I take him. I would take it.
Yeah, but it was, I don't know. It's they actually, did you catch the Easter egg in the book? Robert Redford runs for president in the book.
Yes, of course. But it said RR runs for president. And I was like, oh, Ronald Reagan. And then I was like, then when I started watching the show and it was like Redfordations, I was like, oh, that was fucking Robert Redford, you idiot. I was like, oh, Ronald Reagan. Of course he runs for president. But wait, what about the part where it's like towards the end? It's like at the very, very end with the guy, the Seymour and the journalist guy. And he's like, Seymour, we do not dignify absurdities with coverage. This is still America, goddammit. Who wants a cowboy actor in the White House? Which to me is like, first of all, Ronald Reagan, but second of all, Trump.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's crazy that people like Alan Moore, who can take, something as pop culture as superhero and turn it into a political conversation about extreme ideologies. And looking at these ideologies and finding fault in them and having real critiques of both arguments, right? You always hear these both sides arguments, right? Like it's both sides. But I don't think, but it's not a both sides argument in the sense that we typically talk about like right versus left. He's talking about these ideologies, which are not necessarily right and left. It's almost like in America specifically, we have, and it's probably mirrored a lot in England as well. We have center. We have a center, just right of center party. We have a far right party, and then we have a just left of center. Right. We have these I
think we could say the Democrats are just right of center. To be fair.
Yeah.
I think we have a far right and a just right of center.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, like we have those two things, right? We don't actually have. So if we're talking about those two those two polarities, right? The far right and the just right of center, like there's a lot of both sides you can talk about in that terms, right? But if you add leftist or socialist ideology into that, and I'm not going as far as communism, I personally don't think communism would work, but socialism works. We've seen proof of it, right? So if you take those things and you add it that, you don't have the same contradictions in policies that you would have in those two things. And so when Alan Moore is writing this, he's critiquing that right wing ideology, right? Because Ozymandias's right wing ideology takes him his quote unquote utopian society is killing 3 million people. Rorschach's utopian society is killing all of the people who don't conform, the queer people, the prostitutes, the pimps, the drug dealers, these people, like just killing an entire group of people. And nobody in the middle is talking about what real world solutions to these problems would be.
Right. I feel like Adrian Veidt's solution is not killing 3 million people, or his utopia is not killing 3 million people. His utopia just starts with the death of 3 million people, right? That's just him getting started. Then once he does this, allegedly he can go on and fix everything, right? Isn't that what he says?
Yeah, but then he doesn't, right? Then he doesn't.
Well, no, he doesn't do that. But like, I think to him, the 3 million dead is just necessary evil, right? It's what we heard about, like, oh, old people will be willing to die of COVID for young people. Of course, like, let's kill the old people and the disabled people and the high risk, because like, then we'll be fine. But that's not what he's working towards. He's working towards whatever comes next. He never gets there. You mentioned earlier that when in the movie, when you realized that Dr. Manhattan was black and that God was black, that stuck with you. For me, in the book, the line that literally I had to stop and be like, I need a break, is God exists and he's American. Yeah. That will haunt me forever.
Yeah.
That is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard.
Right?
As an American. I'm like, I don't want that.
I mean,
but I do,
it's crazy.
and I feel like, yeah, like to your point that Dr. Manhattan is sort of this God character. I think like one of the biggest debates I ever remember having in college with a friend of mine who was very religious at the time was about this idea of God and like the three, God is supposed to be all knowing, all powerful, and all good. That's what you're taught in Christianity. But God can't be all three of those things, because if you're all good and all knowing, then you would change things. And if you don't change things, then you're not all powerful, right? Like there's like, you can't be all three of those things at once. And I think this idea that if God exists, that he is, and I'm saying he only because that is the God that we're presented with in this book, that he is American just adds a layer that I'm not interested in. Like, does that mean God isn't capitalist? Does that mean God is a white supremacist? Like, what does it mean to be American? And if God is all of those things, is all of the things that it means to be quote unquote American, I'm not sure that I want that for God.
Absolutely. That's terrifying. And I mean, it does terrify the world, right? It in a lot of ways, it keeps, it makes American values, the standard values that we talk about, that become like implanted, right? It becomes like our 51st state, Vietnam, like the American values are planted on that, and it becomes like a capitalist society. And I think, like the idea, I love, like, the line that sticks with me in the book, which I think is just really brilliant, is like, we're all puppets, Lori. I can just see the strings. Mm-hmm. Because, and I think there's a comment on the idea that Dr. Manhattan is all powerful, is all knowing, and is neither good nor evil, right? I think that's the thing that's the smart decision that I think Alan Moore makes, is to make this being more aptly, like more complicated, right? Because Dr. Manhattan makes mistakes as an all-powerful, all-knowing person. He was just a regular dude before that. We've got that argument about the watchmaker. His father was a watchmaker, which is like that divine watchmaker ideology that came out of like who God really was. And there's like this sort of great universal thing. And I think, Dr. Manhattan being American is terrible.
Well, okay, let me ask you about also. So I thought Dr. Manhattan, and I'm assuming that this has something to do with his name, had to do with the Manhattan Project, because he's like a nuclear thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's how I mean, as soon as I saw the name, I was like, Nuclear bomb, anyone?
Let me tell
Uh,
you this before you ask me your question, though. Did you notice that the blood covering the smiley face connection to the nuclear clock doesn't turn back at the end, right? Because it does, because we actually end up killing the 3 million. It actually end up killing.
oh, it doesn't like after because that's like chapter 11. You mean it doesn't start? Yeah. Well, so
That's a we're supposed to avert a nuclear disaster, but we get this other thing, which is basically a nuclear disaster. Like, what's the difference between a bomb hitting New York and this like alien hitting New York?
right. Well, so that's my question. I want to ask this. I guess this sort of also ties into the title. I am not the best reader when it comes to like these like bigger theme ideas that are played with. So like I wasn't quite sure that I understood the clock and the watch, and then of course Watchmen. And I obviously understand like who watches the Watchmen. Like I understood the metaphor of watching with your eyes, but I had a harder time with the metaphor for watching that meant like a watch, a clock, timekeeping.
So the timekeeping is about the nuclear clock, and how close.
Right, but like his dad is a watchmaker.
And that's connection to the divine watchmaker ideology that some conservative Christians sort of say that there's a divine watchmaker that's sort of like the idea of intelligent design. That the Douglas Adams says this in the best way possible. It's kind of like a puddle, like a hole being in the ground, and because water fills the ground, fills that puddle perfectly. The hole must have been made for the water, which is kind of a ridiculous idea. But people say there's this idea that, like a watch doesn't evolve independently, right? You can't have a spring and then a mechanism and all those things come together to create a watch, right? You actually have to like think intelligently and put them all together. And that's how it does. And so like there's a critique of that because the divine watchmaker makes the God, right? And then the God who knows everything and is involved and can do everything does it, right? He can't really control it. And he says, because everything's already happened. So why do I need to change that? So there's this whole connection between like the connection of, like the ideology of the divine watchmaker, this idea of God. And I think that the whole Dr. Manhattan's entire existence in this book is a metaphor for like American and our relationship to God. Like we are a Christian nation. God loves us. We are the best friends with God. The English were not the best friends with God. We were better friends with God. That's why God loves us better than he loves China. Right.
Right.
And so like all of that is connected into that idea of the divine watchmaker and that intelligent design metaphor.
Okay. So then, but with that, maybe that answers our question of why Dr. Manhattan doesn't do anything or like doesn't stand for anything or stop anything or whatever, is because if God is the divine watchmaker and all the pieces don't work on their own, they have to be put together. But once they're put together, they out God. Once the clock is ticking, you can't take it apart and you can't
put it back. There's nothing you can do about it.
There's nothing you can do about it. So once the watch is clicking, once you put it together, maybe that's the role of God. God puts it together, but once it's put together, there's nothing anyone can do about it. But that still sticks with God is not all powerful, because if he would, he'd find a way to clock the clock. Okay, I have one more thing that I have to ask you about because what the fuck was the Max Shea stuff?
The Max Shea?
The like guy, there's like a guy that was missing or something. Max Shea. Is he the writer of
the Black Freighter?
Yeah.
Oh, I think he was part of the people that wrote the story, like the story that because he was bringing all those people together. So like that was the thing he was doing. Like all these people start going missing, like these scientists and these geneticists and like all these people start going missing and people don't know what's happening to that. They were all the people that were coming together to create that giant monster. Like
Ozymandias took all of them.
Yeah, he took all of those people. Those are the
and
people.
like used their brains.
Yeah,
to
so
do
like
it.
he was like, how do we do this? And he had all the smartest people in the world coming up, building toward this one ideology.
Got it. Thank you. I missed that. Okay, here's my last kind of questions about this. The legacy of Watchmen. Everything I saw when we first picked this book, I just did a quick Google search and it was like, Watchmen has changed comic books forever. It changed the genre. And also Watchmen is the greatest comic of all time. Those are the two things that I saw. How does Watchmen do those things? Why is it the best? What is it? What did it do in the time or since the time that it came out that makes it the one?
Well, just the fact that we're still talking about like all of the different themes that you can run through, like comics
Yeah.
in a lot of ways were very had been up until when we talked about this previously, where I talked about the idea of like comics being unserious. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some great things happening in comics up until the 1980s. There's a lot of really people are exploring. This is when Mouse started to Art Spiegelman started writing Mouse before we got up the complete book in the 1990s. But it was basically taking the superhero genre and asking a lot of questions about like, does this really make sense? Like, because when you expand this out, it becomes silly, right? Like the idea of superheroes becomes silly. And I keep going back to this idea that T'Challa doesn't seem silly because he is protecting his country, as opposed to somebody who is protecting their city in this really weird way. And so I think by questioning the ideas of what superheroes it actually creates new kinds of superheroes. And you get new kinds of stories and expanding on this idea that comics can be a lot deeper, especially superhero comics can be a lot deeper than this really shallow action and adventure sort of thing that was happening before. And don't get, like, I'm not saying this, people are going to get mad at me, but I'm not saying action and adventure is shallow. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it was very one dimensional. It was all action and adventure. And so you get some really good action and adventure, but the majority of it was just boilerplate. Like, I can see this coming from a mile away. And so when people read a combination of books in the 1980s, they read The Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Swamp Thing, and a bunch of other sort of dark and sort of much more adult themes booked. That's when comics people start looking at comics like, I was a kid in the 1980s, so like Watchmen didn't hit me, but it's like the generation, like probably the people who are 10 years older than me. That's when they started seeing things and going, stories can be different than what we've always been reading. And so it basically changes the game. I mean, we talked about Asterios Polyp, and I talk about the concept of carved comics. Like, he's doing things with word balloons that you see in Watchmen, right? The 9-panel grid that's slowly, like the metaphor of the Black Freighter. Like, those are things that I don't think people really played with as much in comics before that. And I think after the fact, you can see a lot of people doing really adult themed comics. I think somebody in one of the threads said Saga was really great. If you haven't read Saga, you should go read it because it's long. So read like the first book and then maybe you'll be hooked. But it's really, really a great story. It's like a fantasy Romeo and Juliet. But there are a lot of things that happen because of Watchmen that I don't think would have happened if Watchmen had not been the book it was.
I love it. I think we're out of time, but do you have anything else you want to add or talk about briefly before we get out of here that we missed? Because I know we didn't get everything.
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize the trigger warnings with Watchmen. Just like, so people.
Glad we're going to recognize that at the very end.
Yeah, at the very end. My students always tell me I get really excited about stuff and I forget to say like, oh, there's some problematic things in there. But just like I said, there's problematic things in there, and this isn't. There's never a reason to do that because people are calling out the problematic things at the time. I also think it's really important to read this and get the ideas that he's dealing with, like these really complicated ideas about form that he's using and political ideology. I think it's like, take all of this in. It's a really great book, and recommend it to a friend.
I love it. So just for people who are listening now, I think, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that the bonus episode this month is going to be David Dennis Jr. and I talking about the show in a lot of detail. So if you read the book but haven't watched the show now, you should watch the show and then join the Stacks Patreon, because we're going to do a deep dive and get a little more into the show because we couldn't do all of that here today. So if you're interested, we're going to do more on the show. Everyone, Joel has books in the world. His most recent is the graphic adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning. He has his own memoir called Fights. Joel, thank you so much for being here. This was awesome.
I'm glad to come. I love talking about comics. So
this was so fun. Well, we might have to do it again. Everybody else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Joel Christian Gill for returning to the show, and to David Hawk for helping to make this conversation possible. All right, now it's time for our August book club announcement. Our book is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. It's a romance novel with themes around grief and loss. It is a very controversial pick. People love it. People hate it. I cannot wait to discuss. Make sure you listen next week to find out who our book club guest will be. If you love the show and want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/thestacks and join the Stacks Pack. Make sure you're subscribed to the Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to leave us a rating and a review. For more from the Stacks, you can follow us on social media at the Stacks Pod on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, and at the Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And you can check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. This episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Lauren Tyree. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tigirigis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.